Darren Cole and his shadowy accomplice walked into the city's busiest theater with a single terrifying purpose: to turn a night of entertainment into a nightmare no one would ever forget. The night started like any other in the bustling downtown district. Families arrived early with children tugging at their parents' hands. Teenagers lined up for tickets to the latest blockbuster, and couples laughed as they carried buckets of popcorn and oversized sodas. The theater glowed brightly against the darkening sky, its neon sign flickering in shades of red and blue. The air buzzed with excitement, the kind of ordinary joy that comes with a Friday evening out. No one suspected that beneath the ordinary hum of chatter and the smell of buttered popcorn, something sinister was about to unfold. Inside Theater 7, the largest auditorium in the complex, the seats were nearly full. People settled in with candy rustling in bags and drinks fizzing as lids popped open. The previews rolled across the screen, and for a moment, everything felt normal. But while the audience's eyes stayed glued to the screen, another pair of eyes was watching from the shadows. Outside, near an emergency exit, a man dressed in dark clothes stood silently, his face hidden behind a plain mask. Hours earlier, he had carefully forced the door's lock so it would open easily when he returned. Now, as the crowd grew distracted by the start of the main feature, he slipped inside carrying a heavy black duffel bag. The cool air of the theater greeted him, and within seconds, the atmosphere of excitement would twist into chaos. The first sound was subtle, almost drowned out by the booming speakers, but then it grew unmistakable. Sharp cracks echoed through the room as the gunman raised his weapon and fired. Screams cut through the air, piercing and panicked as people dove to the ground. Popcorn spilled across the floor, soda splashed over seats, and shoes thudded loudly against the aisles as terrified moviegoers tried to flee. Some crouched beneath their chairs, hands over their heads, praying they would be invisible in the darkness. Others sprinted toward the doors, pushing and stumbling, desperate to get away from the horror that unfolded in seconds. In the lobby, staff members froze as the noise erupted from Theater 7. Panic spread like wildfire as people burst out of the auditorium, their faces pale, their voices shrill. Parents grabbed children, workers tried to guide crowds toward exits, and cell phones lit up as dozens of calls for help flooded emergency lines. The once orderly theater lobby dissolved into chaos, its bright lights now shining over scenes of terror. Outside, the parking lot filled with people rushing into the night, some barefoot, some bleeding, all shaken and gasping for breath. By the time the first squad cars pulled in, their sirens slicing through the night, the gunman was gone. The emergency exit door at the back of Theater 7 swung slowly, still unlocked, leading to the dark alley behind the building. Officers stormed the theater, weapons raised, expecting to confront the shooter, but they found only abandoned seats, dropped belongings, and the lingering echoes of fear. On the floor lay shell casings glinting under the dim glow of the projector. The man who had caused the terror had vanished like a shadow, leaving behind a crime scene that would haunt the city long after that night. Detectives arrived at the theater within minutes, quickly cordoning off the area to preserve evidence. The first task was to secure the scene and help the terrified survivors, many of whom were still shaking, unable to speak clearly, their eyes wide with disbelief. Officers guided them to waiting ambulances, while paramedics tended to minor injuries from falls, scrapes, and trampling during the panic. The theater smelled of popcorn and fear, a combination that made the air feel thick and heavy. Investigators began moving methodically, photographing every detail, collecting shell casings, and examining the paths of destruction. It was clear from the start that the gunman had targeted the auditorium deliberately, choosing the largest theater at the busiest time of night. Surveillance footage from inside the theater offered the first glimpses of the attacker. Grainy images revealed a tall figure in a hooded jacket, carrying the duffel bag. His movements were quick and deliberate, almost unnatural, as he avoided cameras when possible. Forensic analysts noticed something odd. The gunman seemed to know exactly where the exits were and which areas had cameras. He moved with the precision of someone who had studied the building extensively. Officers confirmed that the emergency exit door he had used had been tampered with long before the attack. The lock had been weakened and rigged so it could be opened swiftly, indicating premeditation. Witnesses described the chaos differently, complicating the investigation. Some insisted the man had a limp, while others said his stride was confident and steady. Some claimed to have glimpsed a dark mask, while others swore they saw a hood pulled tightly over the head. Detectives took careful notes, knowing that even small inconsistencies could be critical in piecing together a profile. Meanwhile, forensic teams discovered a symbol spray-painted near the emergency exit, a mask broken in two. At first, it appeared to be simple graffiti, but testing revealed it was freshly applied, likely just minutes before the shooting began. It was a signature, a mark left deliberately to taunt investigators or send a message. The city's news media latched onto every detail, replaying shaky cell phone footage over and over. Fear spread as theaters increased security, and citizens wondered who could commit such a calculated act. Detectives worked tirelessly, reviewing local databases, comparing fingerprints, and following leads. The spray-painted symbol, combined with the unusual planning, suggested the shooter was not only methodical, but obsessed. He wasn't acting randomly. He wanted to make an impact, to instill fear, and to be remembered for what he had done. By the end of the day, investigators had a working theory. The gunman was likely familiar with the theater and had spent weeks planning the attack, studying its layout, observing crowds, and identifying the fastest escape routes. Each clue pointed to someone who blended patience with obsession. The city remained on edge as detectives pieced together the fragments, knowing that the case was far from over. Somewhere out there, the person responsible was still free, and the hunt for him was only beginning. The day after the attack, the city remained tense, with people avoiding movie theaters and crowds. Police presence around theaters increased dramatically, with officers stationed at entrances, checking bags, and patrolling nearby streets. Yet, despite the heightened security, fear lingered in every corner of the downtown district. Detectives worked tirelessly, analyzing the crime scene photos, reviewing footage, and interviewing witnesses again to catch details they might have missed in the initial chaos. Patterns began to emerge that painted a disturbing picture of the gunman's mindset. He was not simply violent, he was methodical, patient, and fixated on creating a spectacle. The investigation led police to the first solid lead. Fingerprints recovered from the duffel bag and a small water bottle left behind in Theater 7 matched a man named Darren Cole. He had once been an employee at the same theater, but had been fired several years earlier for disturbing behavior, including aggressive outbursts and threats toward co-workers. Officers discovered that Darren had never fully left the world of theaters behind. His social media accounts were filled with posts praising violent scenes in movies, often focusing on moments when audiences reacted with shock or fear. It became clear that Darren's obsession with cinema had evolved into a dangerous fixation, blending fantasy and reality in ways that put countless people at risk. Further investigation uncovered more alarming clues. Detectives found that the broken mask symbol, spray-painted near the theater S emergency exit, appeared in other locations connected to Darren. At an abandoned warehouse by the river, officers discovered remnants of old film reels, torn posters, and a projector still flickering to life, despite the building's emptiness. Red paint scrawled on the walls read, "The audience never forgets." The discovery was chilling. The gunman seemed to be leaving messages, turning his attacks into performances meant to terrify and unsettle. Inside the warehouse, investigators also found detailed notes, documenting past theater incidents and plans for future attacks. It was evident that Darren had meticulously prepared his actions, studying crowds, layouts, and even escape routes. The police attempted to track Darren's movements, piecing together sightings and purchases. Surveillance footage from local stores showed him buying spray paint and other materials, always careful to avoid recognition. However, each step forward seemed to be met with a dead end. His apartment was empty, his car abandoned, and neighbors reported no recent activity. Yet one item connected him to the theater. The ticket stub left behind in his apartment indicated that he had returned to the location shortly before the attack. Investigators realized that he had been watching and planning in secret, his resentment and obsession simmering until the perfect opportunity arose. As the investigation continued, fear gripped the city like a shadow. The knowledge that Darren Cole was still at large haunted residents and officers alike. People avoided theaters, double-checking exits and clutching their belongings tightly. Police briefings emphasized caution, urging vigilance and reporting any unusual behavior. Each lead, each discovery, only deepened the understanding that this was not a random act of violence, but a carefully orchestrated assault by a man who had turned his obsession with cinema into a weapon. With every passing day, the urgency to capture Darren grew, knowing that the next attack could be just around the corner, and the stakes were higher than ever before. The investigation intensified as police traced Darren Cole's movements through a network of tips, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. Detectives discovered that he had been frequenting pawn shops, purchasing old film reels, projectors, and even mannequins, all items that suggested a fixation with recreating theater scenes. Officers analyzed the items in his possession, realizing they were not random purchases, but part of a larger, disturbing plan. Each object seemed to have a purpose, a role in some future act that Darren intended to carry out. His obsession had grown beyond anger or revenge. It was now a carefully crafted ritual that blended his past grievances with a twisted vision of performance. A breakthrough came when a gas station clerk reported a man matching Darren's description buying supplies late at night. Surveillance footage confirmed it was him, carrying a backpack and avoiding eye contact with the camera. Officers immediately coordinated a search, tracking his car to the outskirts of the city near an abandoned drive-in theater. The building had long been forgotten, its screens torn and the lot overgrown with weeds, but Darren had transformed it into a private stage. Inside, investigators found projectors running, film reels looping, and mannequins arranged in theater seats as if they were an audience. The scene was unnerving, a reflection of the gunman's obsession with turning violence and fear into a spectacle. Detectives realized the maps found in Darren's apartment and car were far more than simple notations. They marked multiple theaters, each with potential dates for future attacks. The realization that the first shooting was part of a larger ongoing plan created urgency. Officers increased patrols at theaters across the state, issuing warnings and monitoring suspicious activity. The public was advised to report any unusual behavior, yet fear continued to spread. People stayed home, canceling plans, wary of attending movie screenings or public events. Meanwhile, Darren remained elusive. He had vanished from the abandoned drive-in before officers arrived, leaving only a chilling note behind. Every show deserves a finale. Forensic teams examined the note, confirming Darren's handwriting and the fresh red ink matching previous symbols. The message indicated that he was already planning his next act, and authorities realized they were racing against time. Officers coordinated across jurisdictions, sharing details of his patterns, potential targets, and obsessive behaviors. Analysts studied his previous movements, predicting likely locations based on his fixation with theaters and his previous employment. The tension in the city reached a peak as police prepared for another confrontation. SWAT teams, snipers, and patrol units were stationed strategically around potential targets. Investigators understood that Darren's obsession had escalated to the point where he would strike again if given the chance. Every abandoned building, every quiet street near a theater was treated as a potential hideout. Detectives worked around the clock, knowing that the next lead could be the one to finally end the threat. The hunt for Darren Cole became more than a search for a criminal. It was a race to prevent another act of terror to protect the public from a man who had merged fantasy and reality into something deadly and unpredictable.